Hello, how are you? Today I invite you on a peaceful and profound journey to ancient Rome, to discover together what festivals were like that blended pleasure, power and culture. Imagine yourself entering a torchlit space, where sound, scents and sensations gently envelop you, while ancient stories come to life. Prepare to relax and be carried away by this calming narrative, designed to soothe the mind and awaken curiosity, even when discussing complex and fascinating topics. Shall we begin this journey? And you, have you ever imagined what it would be like to be at one of these ancient Roman festivals? Tell me in the comments, where are you watching this story now? And what time is it there? I love learning about these details that connect us, even from afar. Tonight, I want to invite you on a gentle and immersive journey to one of the most fascinating periods in history, ancient Rome. But don't think about the great battle, nor the military conquest, much less the cliché images of imposing senators or gladiators fighting in crowded arenas. I want you to join me on a more silent, almost wisp-like stroll through the corridors of history, to discover a little explored and nuanced side of Roman life, the sexual feast, the rites of pleasure, and the moments when Roman society cast off its shackles and indulged in celebrations where the body and desire gained a public, yet carefully orchestrated space. Take a deep breath, close your eyes for a moment, and imagine yourself walking along cobblestone streets under the golden light of a Roman sunset. The air is filled with the strong scent of spices brought from the east, mingled with the earthy aroma of road dust and the delicate perfume of exotic flowers adorning the villa garden. The distant murmur of Latin conversations echo, while musicians tune their instruments, lyres, flutes, and cymbals, promising to fill the night with soft melodies and hypnotic rhythm. This is Rome, a living, breathing city that never completely sleeps. But behind the daily hubbub and the splendor of its monuments lies a world where body, pleasure, and power intertwine intensely, in celebrations that transcend the simplicity of what we normally imagine. It's not just about debauchery or decadence, as so many clichés would have us believe. These celebrations carried profound meanings. They were a form of cultural, social, and even political expression. I want you to understand, first and foremost, that ancient Roman sex parties were not disorderly affairs where anything went without rules or limits. Quite the contrary, they were immersed in a complex web of custom, social hierarchy, and symbolism. There was a choreography invisible to all present, dictating behavior, who could participate, which pleasures were acceptable, and which were still taboo. Physical pleasure, then, was just one layer within a much broader social phenomenon. Imagine entering one of these houses, called domus, which glowed with torchlight and oil lamps, illuminating frescoes on the walls and the gleam of polished marble on the floor. The sound of footsteps echoing softly on the floor. The air is saturated with aromas myrrh incense and rare resins slowly burning, mingled with the sweet smell of fresh fruit and red wine poured from jugs. Voices round, in varying tone, laugh, whisper secret, while delicate or rough hands touch, intertwine, and gestures of invitation and reciprocity exchanged naturally and, at the same time, with a certain formality. You feel the texture of the fine fabric against your skin, clothes that alternate between the luxury of imported silks and the simplicity of linen, often worn in a way that leaves parts of the body exposed, inviting glances and touches. There's no rush. Everything happens with an almost ritualistic cadence, where time seems to stretch out so that each sensation can be fully experienced. But despite this setting that may seem sensual and even magical, we mustn't forget that these parties took place in a society, like any other, had its contradictions, prejudices, and tension. Sex was seen as both natural and, at times, dangerous. Relationships between men and women, between free citizens and slaves, between the powerful and the marginalized, also manifested themselves on these occasions, carrying with them the echoes of inequalities and social norms. As we explore this universe, we'll realize that these festivals reveal much more than just carnal desire. They speak of the pursuit of pleasure, yes, but also of status, political alliance, the celebration of fertility and life, and even resistance to a world in constant transformation. They are a mirror of human complexity, reflecting light and shadow, beauty and cruelty, freedom and control. Therefore, I invite you to set aside any judgments or preconceived notion. Let's look at these moments together with curiosity and empathy. After all, history is made of the details that are hidden from view in the grand official narrative, and it is in this silent space that the true magic of understanding the past resides. If you're enjoying this slow, soulful journey, a simple gesture of liking or subscribing to the channel will help me keep bringing these stories. And if you'd like, leave a comment telling me where you're listening to this story right now, perhaps at what time of day, or what feelings it's stirring in you. Let's take a deep breath and prepare our minds to move forward towards the next chapter, where we will understand the historical context that shaped these festivals. The culture of a Rome that lived between order and transgression, between devotion to the gods and the search for earthly pleasure. Imagine waking up in ancient Rome on a mild morning as the sun begins to touch the marble domes and red tile roofs. You breathe in the air, full of life, mingled with the scent of market, vegetable garden, animals, and the lingering aroma of incense from the homes of the wealthy. The city is a mosaic of sounds, the cries of street vendors, the clopping of horses on the cobblestone streets, the murmur of conversations in Latin and Greek languages that pulse through the veins of the empire. Rome at the height of its power was a vibrant metropolis, expanding beyond the city walls, with its grand temples, baths, theaters, and famous forums that were the heart of public life. But it was also a place of sharp contrasts where the ostentatious wealth of the elite contrasted with the poverty of the masses who lived in the insulae, the overcrowded public housing. In this complex landscape, daily life was permeated by customs and rituals that shaped how people related to one another, expressed their status, and understood their place in the world. Roman society was deeply hierarchical, with rigid distinctions between citizens, slaves, freedmen, plebeian, and patrician. These differences permeated every aspect of existence, from the right to participate in politics to access to education and, of course, social life and pleasures. Respect for traditions and gods guided many aspects of life. Religious celebrations, the worship of household gods, and the observance of public festivals permeated the annual calendar, creating a sacred rhythm that united the community. At the same time, Rome was a city in constant change, influenced by the cultures it incorporated, from the Etruscans and Greeks to conquered peoples like the Egyptians and Oriental. This cultural melting pot created a complex coexistence between conservatism and openness to new ideas, between moral control and surprising permissions in certain contexts. Sexuality, for example, was viewed differently from the modern view. There was a mix of taboos, permissions, and power plays that created a multifaceted and often contradictory scenario. To understand sex party, then, we need to delve into this society. The body was both an expression of status and an arena of power. Social relations were often mediated by public and private displays of affection, desire, and domination, which manifested themselves at banquets, theaters, homes, and parties. It was not only a celebration of pleasure, but also a space where political alliances were cemented, where prestige was built through generosity and the ability to provide memorable experiences for guests. The lavishness of the parties, the quality of the food, the artistic performance, of course, the erotic atmosphere all converged to create memorable and meaningful. At the same time, there were social norms regulating who could participate, how they should behave, and what boundaries could not be crossed without damaging one's honor and reputation. Male power, for example, was expressed not only in the public domain, but also in the way sex and desire were exercised and viewed. Sexual freedom had clear boundaries, especially for women and less privileged social groups. In this dynamic, the festivals became a microcosm of Roman society, where the interplay of appearance, power, and desire unfolded under watchful eyes and social expectation. Understanding this context is essential to see beyond cliches and stereotypes, to realize that these celebrations, despite being charged with sensuality, were also the stage for a complex human negotiation. Now, as you imagine this scenario, I invite you to feel the breeze passing through the villa's column, hear the distant melody of a flute, perceive the heat of the fire in the torches, and breathe deeply, letting this atmosphere prepare your mind to discover, in the next chapter, the details that make these parties so unique and full of meaning. As I delve deeper into my understanding of life in ancient Rome, I realize that festivals, especially those that many superficially recognize as mere gatherings of excess, played a much larger and more intricate role in Roman society than simply the pursuit of immediate pleasure. These celebrations, known and sometimes misinterpreted as mere orgy, were in fact crucial moments when power relations, politics, social status, and even spirituality intertwined delicately, almost like an invisible dance, shaping the Roman social fabric. When considering the role of festivals in ancient Rome, it's important to abandon the images created by cinema and popular culture, those exaggerated scenes where everything seems freewheeling and unrestrained, to consider the complexity of these gatherings with greater care and respect. Roman festivals, or convivia, as they were called, were carefully organized events that reflected the prestige and wealth of the host, serving not only for a personal enjoyment, but also as a stage for a social and political demonstration. It's as if these parties were the beating heart of the Roman elite's social life, where alliances were forged, favors were granted, and hierarchy was reaffirmed. More than just a gathering for fun, these moments were valuable opportunities for those who wanted to maintain or expand their influence within society. An invitation to attend such a party wasn't given to just anyone. It was a sign of trust, an open door to a select circle where power manifested itself subtly or decisively. Attendance, therefore, was worth as much as what was consumed or done within these walls, a valuable social currency that could open doors and cement reputations. During these celebrations, banquets offered not only elaborate delicacies but also a spectacle of flavors, aromas, and presentations that enchanted the senses, creating an atmosphere conducive to conversation, negotiation, and games of seduction that went far beyond mere physical pleasure. The carefully selected food and wine acted as catalysts for conviviality, soothing tensions and creating an environment where the boundaries of everyday life could be gently broken. Nevertheless, the celebration of the body and desire that took place at these gatherings also carried profound symbolism, often linked to ancient rituals and beliefs about fertility, prosperity, and cosmic balance. Sex, far from being a merely private act, was incorporated into the social and religious fabric in a way that helped strengthen community bonds and ensure the continuity of the established. And so, Roman festivals reveal themselves as a multifaceted portrait of a culture that knew how to combine, in a single event, the pursuit of pleasure and the maintenance of power structure. Every gesture, every word, every touch was charged with meaning, in a social choreography that required attention and wisdom to execute. Therefore, when we consider the role of these festivals, we must understand that they were a reflection of Rome itself, a place of beauty and brutality, of order and transgression, of tradition and innovation. Festivals, while offering moments of escape and delight, reaffirm the complexity of an empire sustained not only by weapons, but by the delicate web of human relationship. As I imagine this scene, I feel the distant sound of suppressed laughter, the clink of blown glass goblets, the intoxicating scent of fresh flowers, and the cool texture of marble beneath my hand. Everything blends to create a vivid picture of a Roman night, where body, mind, and spirit meet in a game as ancient as humanity itself. This is the invitation these festivals offer us today, a careful and curious look at the past, which allows us to understand that pleasure, power, and culture are inseparable, and that, even in such distant time, the complexities of social life never ceased to echo our own surges and conflict. Imagine, then, that you walk through the entrance of a Roman domus, the typical home of the elite of ancient Rome, where some of the most memorable parties took place. The solid wooden gate opens slowly, creaking softly as you pass, are immediately enveloped by an atmosphere that blends the coolness of the interior with the welcoming warmth of the lit torches all round. The central courtyard, the impluvium, is a space open to the sky, where moonlight spills like a silvery veil, reflected by the calm water of the small pool in the ground, creating silent dances of light and shadow on the walls painted with vibrant fresco. The air is filled with a delicate blend of aromas, the intense scent of jasmine and rose, the earthy smell of wet clay on the floor, and the subtle hint of incense burned carefully so as not to suffocate the guests. The guests, who have already begun to arrive, move elegantly between the Corinthian columns supporting the partially open ceiling, their footsteps muffled by the polished marble, which seems to hold the echo of laughter and whispers from past parties. The walls are adorned with tapestries and paintings depicting ancient myths, memories of gods and heroes who, in some way, silently participate in the scene unfolding there. In the main hall, the triclinear large beds ranged in a U-shaped are carefully prepared. Embroidered linen cushion, fine fabrics, and soft animal skins invite rest and conversation, while low tables carry plates of fresh fruit, cheeses, and small cakes made with honey, accompanied by jugs overflowing with red and white wine, mingling with the sweet aroma of fermented grapes. The soft, warm lighting creates an aura of intimacy and mystery. Bright lanterns and small lamps cast shadows that seem to move slowly across the wall, bringing static figures to life and lending an almost hypnotic feel to the space. The music, a combination of flutes, zithers, and hand drums, fills the space with slow, inviting melodies, lulling the senses and preparing the heart for what's beyond the courtyard and main hall. There are carefully designed interior gardens, where fountains murmur discreetly and aromatic plants like lavender, rosemary, and mint grow in abundance, casting a natural freshness that contrasts with the human warmth of the celebration. Walking along these smooth stone paths is like entering another world, a refuge where time seems to slow down and nature embraces the senses. But parties weren't limited to private home. Often, public baths, large bathing and leisure complexes also hosted gatherings where the body and pleasure were explored in a more communal setting. In these baths, the hot steam and warm water helped relax tired muscle, while private areas provided spaces for more private conversation, games, of course, the erotic encounters that permeated Roman culture. The streets leading to these places were alive until late, lit by torches, where slaves and servants circulated to tend to every need, and street musicians offered their performance. The sounds of the night market mingled with the murmur of water from the public fountain, and the smell of freshly prepared dishes drifted from nearby tavern, creating the soundtrack and setting the scene before the festivity. When imagining this setting, it's impossible not to feel the vibrancy of life that pulsed through these spaces, the combination of luxury and simplicity, public and private, sacred and profane. Each space was carefully crafted to create a complete sensory experience, where architecture, aromas, colors, sounds, and touch combined to envelop guests in an atmosphere of pleasure and discovery. And even when the party spread beyond the walls of the domus, into the lush gardens or the reserved areas of the baths, the feeling of exclusivity and ritual remained intact, reminding all those present that they were part of something greater and ancient tradition, a social game where every gesture had its weight and meaning. In this environment, time seemed to take on a new dimension, where everyday concerns were left aside, and the present moment was transformed into a dance of senses and emotion, celebration of body and soul in harmony. I invite you to take a deep breath, close your eyes, and imagine yourself walking through these stone corridors, feeling the cool of the Roman night on your skin, listening to the low voices and distant music, absorbing the aromas and textures that form the living tapestry of this history, so that, together, we can continue to unravel the secrets and nuances of the festivals of ancient Rome. Entering a feast in ancient Rome meant much more than simply passing through a gate and joining a group of people. It was entering a microcosm of society, a space where every presence carried meaning and every interaction unfolded within a delicate interplay of status and power. When I think of the guests at these celebrations, I imagine not an indistinct mass, but a carefully chosen collection of individuals, each occupying their place in the complex social hierarchy that permeated Roman life. At that time, being invited to a party at the home of a patrician or senator was a clear sign of acceptance, of prestige, a recognition that went beyond mere pleasure and could influence political, economic, and personal policy. The guests, those privileged individuals who received the invitation, formed an elite. Although within this elite there were levels and distinctions that defined proximity to the host and the real power. Each held, I imagine the invitation arriving in the form of a discreet messenger, bearing not just a simple written word, but a seal, a symbol of the event's importance. Refusing such an invitation could mean losing allies and opportunities, while accepting it opened the door to nights of deep conversation, silent alliances. Of course, active participation in the complex dynamics of pleasure and socialization. But it wasn't just free and influential citizens who participated. Within this environment, the presence of freedmen, skilled slaves, artists, musicians, on some occasions, respected prostitutes, carefully calculated. They played essential roles in the running of the party, whether entertaining the guests or providing the moments of relaxation and desire that marked these gatherings. The number of guests varied according to the size of the house and the occasion, but nothing was left to chance. Spaces were planned to ensure comfort and intimacy, and the flow of people was subtly choreographed, where every gesture, look, and word had a purpose. Sitting close to the host, being served the finest wines and delicacies, or even being invited for a private conversation were signs of status, which everyone knew precisely how to decipher. This rigid selection reinforced the exclusive nature of the parties, making them environments where social belonging was reaffirmed and power plays out in an almost theatrical manner. Even simply attending was a demonstration of influence, while withdrawal or absence were interpreted as signs of discontent or isolation. The conversations intertwined a variety of topics: politics, philosophy, naturally, stories and rumors about other members of society. It was also a space for exchanging favors, strengthening alliances, and building a network of contacts that sustained the empire's functioning, often more effectively than official channels. Yet, even with all this organization and distinction, there was a common thread that united everyone present: the pursuit of pleasure, a respite from the rigors of everyday life, strengthening of human bonds through coexistence. Eroticism, far from being a mere physical act, was an integral part of this social experience, manifesting itself in looks, touches, words, and gestures that invited intimacy and relaxation. Thus, attendance at Roman festivals was simultaneously a privilege, a responsibility, and an opportunity. Each guest, upon crossing the threshold, entered a space where the rules of ordinary life were gently replaced by a code of their own, one that valued the balance between control and surrender, public and private, power and pleasure. As I imagine this scene, I feel the softness of the fabrics covering the chairs, the warmth spreading through the room from the candles and torches, the aroma of perfumes blending sandalwood, myrrh, and fresh flowers. I hear the murmur of voices mingling, the suppressed laughter escaping, and the clink of glasses toasting wings and life. This is the setting where guests become protagonists, where each move is a fundamental piece on the intricate chessboard of ancient Rome, and where the invitation to the party is much more than a call to celebrate. It is an invitation to actively participate in building a destiny of an empire. As I contemplate life in ancient Rome, one of the images that comes most vividly to mind is that of food and drink, elements that played an essential role in festivities and celebrated the wealth, abundance, and pleasure of a fascinating culture. Immersed in this atmosphere, can smell the aromas that filled the halls and gardens where guests gathered, an invitation to the senses that went far beyond the mere need to nourish the body. It was a ritual that awakened emotions. In these strengthened bonds, I picture the low table, laden with bowls and platters made of painted ceramic and polished bronze, where fresh fruit, soft, sweet grapes, vibrant pomegranates is carefully raised, their colors contrasting with the golden glow of honey delicately poured over slices. Bread, small plates hold black and green olive, seasoned with herbs harvested from the nearby hills, their intense, slightly bitter flavor tantalizing the guest's palate. The variety of dishes is surprising. Fresh fish caught in the rivers and seas that bathe the empire, prepared with spices imported from distant regions of the East, such as cumin, coriander, and saffron, blending exotic flavors with the simplicity of Mediterranean cuisine. Succulent and aromatic roast meats are served, alongside grilled vegetables and salads seasoned with virgin olive oil and wine vinegar, creating a harmonious balance of flavors and texture. Guests hold delicate, colorful blown glass glasses filled with red, white, or rose wine, whose careful fermentation and refined quality demonstrate the host's prestige. Wine is not just a drink, it is a symbol of conviviality, a bridge that unites those present in moments of celebration and exchange. It is served generously, encouraging toasts that echo softly off the walls of the room, while voices rise in laughter and relaxed conversation. Amidst this backdrop, musicians play melodies that accompany the rhythm of the feast, their notes flowing like a calm river, while guests slowly savor each, allowing the flavors to expand and reveal their nuances. The pleasure of the meal is amplified by the ambience, the soft light of the oil lamps, the freshness of the surrounding gardens. The distant murmur of the fountains complete the sensory symphony. But what makes this experience even more fascinating is how food at Roman feasts was intrinsically linked to social and symbolic practice. The dishes and drinks served were not chosen randomly, but carefully selected to impress, to demonstrate the host's ability to provide the best, and to reinforce the guest's social standing. The repetition of certain foods, the use of rare and imported ingredients, and the way each dish was presented reflected a non-verbal language of power, prestige that everyone present knew and decoded. Thus, food became a form of communication, a silent narrative that permeated the environment and guided interaction. Furthermore, parties often respected the rhythms of the body and mind, offering breaks between meals for conversation, games, and moments of rest, which helped create a relaxed atmosphere conducive to heightening the senses and allowing emotions to express themselves. As I imagine this scene, I feel the soft texture, fresh fruit, the complex flavor of aged wine, the gentle warmth that spreads through my body as I savor the rich and aromatic dishes. I hear the clink of glasses, the quiet footsteps of servants circulating discreetly, and the enveloping murmur of voices intertwining in stories and comfort. This multi-sensory experience is an invitation to delve not only into the history of food custom, but also into the essence of Roman social life, where food and drink were bridges to pleasure, power, and human connection. It is in this moment, in this encounter between body and culture, that feasts reveal their true depth, transcending mere delight and becoming celebrations of existence in all its complexity. As I delve deeper into daily life in ancient Rome, I realize that medicine and healthcare played a fundamental role, albeit shrouded in limitations and beliefs that today may seem distant or even stray. Walking mentally through the hallways of these homes and spaces where parties and gatherings took place, I imagine the practices they followed, the methods that sought to alleviate pain, heal wounds, and preserve life, even in the face of knowledge still in its infancy. Roman medicine reflected the complexity and cultural melting pot of the time. Greek, Etruscan, and Egyptian influences blended, creating a system that, despite its limitations, advanced with curiosity and practice. Doctor, known as medicus, circulated among the elite, offering their service, while the common people often resorted to home remedies, prayers, and protective ritual. In the intimate setting of a feast or a noble residence, the presence of a physician or a specialized slave was essential, especially since the excesses of celebration and daily life brought with them a variety of risks from food poisoning to accidents with weapons. I can almost hear the soft murmur of voices discussing symptoms and remedies as the physician prepares ointments and potions using carefully harvested herbs, roots, and flowers that promise to alleviate ancient ailments. The use of medicinal plants, such as myrrh, aloe, and lily of the valley, was common, and the Roman pharmacopoeia already contained a significant range of substances for treating wounds, fevers, and inflammation. These preparations, applied with steady and patient hands, were accompanied by words of comfort, whose simplicity brought hope to those facing fragile health. But the medicine of the time also reflected the people's religious and superstitious beliefs, rituals, prayers to healing gods, such as Asclepius, and the use of amulets to ward off evil were common practices, intertwining the physical with the spiritual in a joint quest for health. I imagine the calm atmosphere of a small sanctuary dedicated to these gods, where the sick and their families came to seek protection, offering incense and leaving their prayers. When it came to parties and social life, hygiene was a constant challenge. Sanitary conditions, while surprisingly advanced in some respects, still didn't guarantee the prevention of diseases that today would be easily preventable. Public baths, latrines, and running water in some areas of the city helped maintain a certain level of cleanliness. But the enclosed spaces, the intense circulation of people, and the consumption of food and drink in less than ideal conditions posed clear risk. Under these circumstances, when a guest or even a host fell ill, care efforts, immediate but often limited, bloodletting, cupping, other invasive procedures which we now know to have controversial effects were common, performed by experienced hands, but guided by theories that sought to balance the body's humors, a concept inherited from Hippocratic medicine. I feel the doctor's careful touch, the pressure of his hands as he applies a poultice, the strong aroma of herbs burning on a small ember nearby, while his low voice explains the treatment and offers reassuring words. Despite the limitation, there was a deep dedication to trying to alleviate suffering, his search for a cure that blended science, tradition, and infectious diseases. Wounds caused by fighting and birth complications were constant challenges, and mortality remained high, especially among the most vulnerable. The presence of death was a frequent companion, but also a stimulus for medical practices to evolve, allowing accumulated experience to be passed down from generation to generation. And even amidst this fragility, human resilience manifested itself in small achievements, a patient regaining strength, a wound healing, a fever break. These silent victories, encapsulated in simple gestures and moments of care, constituted the true story of Roman medicine, a story of struggle, learning, and humanity. As I imagine this scenario, I can hear the whisper of leaves being crushed, feel the gentle warmth of the oil applied to my aching skin, and perceive the tranquility that the careful touch brings to my tired body. All of this forms a sensory tapestry that connects past and present, demonstrating that, despite the difference, the pursuit of well-being is a constant that spans the century. Thus, in the stillness of these practices and care, the nuances of Roman life are revealed, where the pleasure of festivities and the celebration of the body coexisted with the awareness of human vulnerability, and where care, even if rudimentary, was an act of love and resistance in the face of the uncertainties of existence. As I continue to explore the intricacies of feasting in ancient Rome, a fascinating layer emerges, the games and entertainment that filled the hours between conversation, banquet, and more intimate encounter. These moments of fun were not merely empty pastime, but an essential part of the social experience, a way to strengthen bonds, create memories, in some cases, even exert influence and power. I imagine the room, lit by a flickering candle, where small groups gather round low tables, where ancient game pieces are carefully read, the sound of dice being rolled, the gentle clink of moving pieces. All of this creates an almost hypnotic rhythm, inviting concentration and light, friendly competition. Board games were popular, featuring strategies that required patience and cunning, such as Lotrum Cooley, a war game where players moved pieces to capture their opponent, perhaps reflecting the battles that marked the empire. Round them, soft laughter and commentary mingled. As players sought more than victory, they sought companionship, attention, the pleasure of interaction. But the entertainment went beyond board game. Poets and musicians were invited to present their works, narrating stories of gods, heroes, and impossible loves, enlivening the party with words that enchanted and touched the soul. The rhythm of the lyre and the breath of the flute created a delicate atmosphere, making the setting even more conducive to introspection or romance. I also imagine small performances, sensual dances involving smooth, precise movement, almost ritualistic, inviting guests to lose themselves in the magic of the moment. These spectacles were carefully planned to entertain and awaken the senses, without overstepping the bounds of social decorum. Amidst all this, conversation flows naturally, intertwined with the emotions stirred by the games and performance. Camaraderie strengthens, tensions dissolve, and the party comes to life in multiple dimensions, where every gesture and expression is part of a complex and beautiful time. There seems to take on a different quality, where minutes stretch out, inviting contemplation and surrender. And I feel the gentle warmth emanating from nearby bodies, the sweet aroma of perfumes, the distant echo of voices telling ancient stories, composing rich and enveloping sensory tapestry. These games and entertainment, then, are not just a pastime. They are the soul of the party. What unites, brings people together, and creates memories that transcend the fleeting moment, leaving deep marks on the hearts of those who participate. As I continue my journey through ancient Rome, one aspect that inevitably catches my attention is the complex way in which sex manifested itself at parties and in everyday life. Far beyond the simple physical act, sex in Rome carried profound meanings, blending pleasure, power, ritual, and even politics in a delicate interweaving that revealed much about the soul of that civilization. I imagine the scene calmly, almost like a painting with soft details and warm color. The room is enveloped in a subtle perfume, a blend of incense and natural aromas, while the torchlight dances on the wall, casting shadows that seem to whisper ancient secrets. Amidst this scene, bodies move closer, but not in a disorderly or disrespectful manner. There's an implicit choreography, a silent laugh, made of glances, gestures, and touches that invite intimacy. For the Romans, sex was a natural part of life, something that didn't carry the same restrictive moral burden we find in later eras. However, this didn't mean there was an absence of rule. Quite the contrary. There were clear social norms regulating who could do what, when. These rules reflected the power structure and hierarchy that permeated society as a whole. Among free men, for example, dominance and the protection of honor were essential. The active and passive roles in the sexual act had strong social connotations, and sexual freedom was often interpreted in light of these distinctions. Women, in turn, lived under a network of expectations and limitations. Although in the private spaces of parties, some of them could experience greater freedom than in other spheres of life. At parties, sex took many forms. It was a space where seduction could flourish, where desire was celebrated, but also where power plays out. The exchange of favors, silent pacts, and displays of public affection blended with eroticism and pleasure, creating a rich and complex atmosphere. I imagine the whispered conversations between guests, where veiled proposals are made, alliances are forged, and pleasure is a currency as valuable as gold. Between the columns of the ballroom, gentle touches and lingering glances speak louder than words, and the music that fills the party seems synchronized with the rapid heartbeats. But sex in Rome also had a ritualistic side. Certain acts and practices were linked to religious beliefs and symbolism that sought to ensure fertility, prosperity, and the protection of the gods. It was a manifestation of the sacred in the profane, a delicate balance that could only be maintained by those who understood its rule. As I imagine all this, I feel the warmth of close skin, the light touch of hands exploring with respect and curiosity, the muffled sound of sighs, suppressed laughter blending with the soft melody that runs through the room. All of this creates a sense of deep connection, of celebrating life in its multiple dimensions. These sexual displays at Roman festivals therefore reveal much more than mere desires. They are windows into the understanding of a culture that knew how to integrate body and soul, pleasure and responsibility, public and private. These are moments where humanity reveals itself in its essence, full of complexity, beauty, contradictions. As the night slowly unfolds in Roman homes, I reflect on the delicate balance that existed in relationships between men and women during festival. It's a nuanced topic, where pleasure and freedom coexisted with rigid social expectations and deeply rooted hierarchical structure. I imagine a room where women and men move with grace and care, aware of the role each plays in this meaningful space. The women, often adorned with fine jewelry and light fabrics that leave their skin visible under the torchlight, radiate a presence that blends strength and softness, mystery and openness. But despite their beauty and allure, their freedom within these festivals is limited by unwritten rules that define how far they can go and how they should behave. Roman society, while allowing certain spaces for a female expression, still maintained rigid expectations regarding women's modesty, fidelity, and public behavior. It's a complex game, where the female body is simultaneously valued and controlled, admired and restricted. During the party, some women found moments of greater autonomy, actively participating in the games, dancing, conversation, even pleasure. Others, however, remained more reserved, observing the interactions with a watchful, protected by the limits imposed on them by society. Men, in turn, move with a posture of confidence and dominance, expressing their power not only through wealth and social standing, but also through the way they conduct interpersonal relationships. The male role at parties is marked by a combination of charm, assertiveness, and respect for the conventions that maintain group order. In this setting, interactions between the genders are full of subtleties, looks that speak, gestures that invite, words that seduce. It's a delicate dance, where each step can signify closeness or separation, and where silent understanding between those present is fundamental to the unfolding of the evening. I feel the softness of the fabric enveloping my skin, the warmth that spreads when hands lightly touch, the sound of whispers fading into the background melody. Everything creates an atmosphere where desire and respect intertwine, creating a picture rich in emotions and possibility. Reflecting on these relationships, I realize that they reveal the tensions and contradictions of ancient Roma society that celebrated pleasure but also imposed limits, that valued freedom but restricted it within clear hierarchies. Festivals, therefore, become spaces where these dynamics manifest themselves in all their complexity, demonstrating that humanity is always a mixture of opposites. As I mentally review the details of festivals in ancient Rome, I can't help but notice the striking and paradoxical presence of prostitutes and slaves in these gatherings. They were essential figures, not only for the role they played, but for the social complexity they represented, reflecting the tensions of a fascinating and multifaceted culture. I imagine these people moving with cautious steps, their eyes attentive to the dynamics of the space, aware of the role assigned to them and the opportunities that might rise amid these celebrations. Prostitutes, often called meretresses, occupied an ambiguous place in Roman society. Although they were marginalized in many ways, at festivals and in urban life, their presence was almost inevitable and, in a way, accepted as part of the social experience. They weren't just escorts or objects of desire. Some of them possessed knowledge of the body, sensuality, and the arts of pleasure that made them figures of admiration and respect among certain groups. In many cases, their skills went beyond the physical, involving social intelligence, conversational skills, and the ability to read people and environment, becoming key players in the social networks that were woven at parties. Slaves, in turn, although they were property and subject to many limitations, had roles that went beyond hard labor and servitude. Some were trained to entertain, care for, serve discreetly, and even participate in the dynamics of parties in ways that required tact and sensitivity. They could be musicians, dancers, masseurs, or even escorts, performing roles that contributed to the atmosphere of relaxation and pleasure. The relationship between these groups and the free guests was complex, at times marked by tension and rigid boundaries, at other times charged with complicity and exchange. The presence of prostitutes and slaves revealed social hierarchies, but also spaces where norms could be challenged or reinterpreted. I imagine the scene in detail, the dim light illuminating the room, the soft sound of music, the mingled aroma of expensive perfumes and subtle sweat. Voices mingle in conversations, laughter, and sighs, while hands explore, comfort, and seduce with a delicacy that transcends the barriers imposed by status. This coexistence fraught with ambiguity, expresses the complexities of ancient Rome, where power, pleasure, and inequality intertwine intensely. The bodies that meet and interact at the festivals carry story, desires, and limitations that reflect the human condition in its entirety. As I imagine these interactions, I feel the texture of silk against my skin, the firmness of their touch, the warmth slowly spreading. I hear the murmur of conversations and the steady rhythm of the music, creating a scene where time seems to slow down, inviting reflection and understanding. These figures, often invisible in grand historical narrative, come to life at parties, revealing that history is not made solely by the powerful, but also by those who, even on the margins, shape the encounters and experiences that define a culture. As the festive atmosphere continues to unfold before me, my attention turns to the clothing and adornment, elements that play as fundamental a role in the atmosphere of these celebrations as the food, music, and intimate encounter. Every fabric, every piece of jewelry, every detail of appearance revealed not only personal taste, but also the status, intentions, and place each individual occupied in the intricate social tapestry of ancient Rome. I imagine the women walking slowly through the hall, wrapped in light, translucent fabric, like fine linen, which reveal their bodies with an almost ethereal delicacy. The fabric feels soft and refreshing against the skin, perfect for the warm nights when these parties took place. The cloaks, or palace, fall in gentle waves over the shoulders, while the long tunics, called stola, adorn the figures with classical elegance, simultaneously revealing modesty and sensuality. Men, in turn, wear simple but high-quality tunics, often with embroidery and sashes that indicate their position and prestige. The cloak, called a toga, is reserved for special occasions, and wearing it at a party was a sign of respect for traditions and elevated status. I imagine the heavy fabric of the toga gliding with dignity as they move around the room, maintaining the posture and authority their social role required. But it wasn't just the fabrics that spoke volume. Jewelry and adornments carried their own language, replete with symbolism. Gold necklaces with delicate pendants, earrings that caught the light of torches, fine bracelets, and rings with precious stones were worn to highlight beauty, power, wealth. The shine of these accessories reflected not only the ambient light, but also the attention and respect the wearer hoped to attract. Amidst these ostentatious displays, small flowers were woven into hair or worn as ornaments, adding a natural, fresh touch that contrasted with the shine of the gold and the softness of the fabric. The aroma of the flowers mingled with the intense perfume applied to the skin, creating an olfactory symphony that enveloped the senses and heightened the sensory experience of the celebration. I imagine the texture of these ornaments under my fingers, the feel of the cool gold against my skin, the soft warmth of the fabric gliding through my hand, and the subtle freshness of freshly cut. All of this created a scenario where appearance became an extension of personality and intention, a form of nonverbal communication that spoke directly to the eyes and the heart. These clothing and adornment choices were, however, much more than mere aesthetics. They functioned as social codes, indicating who could approach, who should be respected, who was open to seduction or conversation. Knowing how to interpret these signals was essential to successfully navigating the intricacies of the party, establishing connection, and preserving honor and prestige. As I contemplate all this, I feel a sense of calm and awe at the cultural richness these details represent. It's as if each thread, each stone, each petal is a sigh from the past, invitation to understand the complexity and beauty of Roman life in its entirety. On a quiet night, enveloped by the soft shadow of the torches illuminating the walls of the Roman villa, I reflect on the rituals and symbolism that permeated festivals in ancient Rome, giving these gatherings a dimension beyond mere pleasure and entertainment. These celebrations were not merely moments of fun or debauchery, but true spaces where the sacred and the profane intertwined, where humans sought gestures and words, a deeper connection with the divine and with their own destiny. As I enter this setting, I smell the delicate aroma of incense burning on small, makeshift altars, while images of gods and goddesses silently observe, timeless witnesses to the emotions and desires that manifest themselves. The presence of these religious symbols lends the celebration a weight and solemnity that, at first glance, might seem at odds with the lightness and joy of the atmosphere, but which, in fact, reveal the complexity of the human experience. The rituals involved in the festivals often included offerings to the gods, chants, and gestures that sought to invoke protection, fertility, and prosperity for the participants and the community. Sexuality, openly celebrated, was seen as a vital force, a link to the cosmic energies that sustain life and the order of the world. In this context, pleasure was not merely an end in itself, but a manifestation of the sacred, a way to participate in the eternal dance of the universe. I imagine the guests, between toasts, approaching the small altars, laying flowers, offering whispered words that blend devotion and hope. The music, soft and rhythmic, accompanies these moments, creating an atmosphere where time seems to dissolve and the present merges with the eternal. The symbols scattered throughout the space amulet, carved images, designs painted on the walls function as bridges between the visible and the invisible, between the mundane and the spiritual. They remind those present that life, with all its complexities and pleasures, is embedded in a greater order, where respect and harmony are essential. This ritualistic aspect of the festivals reveals a Rome that knew how to combine opposites, that accepted the duality between the sacred and the profane, between control and surrender, between reason and emotion. It is a testament to the depth of Roman culture, which saw in the celebration of the body and desire a legitimate form of connection with the divine. When I close my eyes, I feel the warmth of the candles, the distant sound of chanting, the aroma of incense mingling with the fragrance of flowers. All of this forms a sensory tapestry that invites reflection and rest, an experience that transcends time and connects us to the roots of humanity. As the celebration progresses, cultural nuances begin to reveal themselves more clearly, painting a complex picture of the diversity, prejudices, conflicts that permeated Roman society. Amid the laughter, conversation, and exchange of glances, I realize that what seemed like a mere celebration becomes a microcosm of the empire, where different origins, beliefs, and social positions intertwine, sometimes harmoniously, other times with subtle or explicit. I imagine the guests coming from various parts of the vast Roman territory, men and women with distinct features, dialects, and customs, all gathered under one roof, but carrying with them the baggage of their histories and identity. This diversity brings cultural richness, but also challenges, as differences can provoke estrangement, suspicion, and sometimes even hidden conflict. Prejudices, often rooted in long-held beliefs and fear of others, manifest themselves in small gestures, suspicious glances, and cautious conversation. In one corner, I can feel the weight of the silent exclusion of those who don't fully belong, while in another space, unlikely alliance blossom, born of curiosity and the desire to understand and connect. Women, in particular, faced limitations and judgments that reflected the rigid norms of the time. Their role at parties and in society was defined by expectations that limited their freedom. However, paradoxically, in these gatherings, some women found opportunities to express their personalities, challenge convention, and exert influence, albeit discreetly and subtly. Music and dance serve as bridges that transcend cultural barriers, creating moments of communion where differences seem to temporarily dissolve. I feel the enveloping rhythm that invites movement, the warmth shared between bodies, and the lightness that permeates the atmosphere, providing breaths of joy and freedom. However, I cannot ignore that this coexistence was also marked by disputes and tensions, reflections of social inequalities, political ambitions, and personal rivalry. Parties thus become arenas where power is exercised not only through words, but through looks, gestures, and meaningful silence. Among the guests, there are also those who, although less visible, play essential roles: slaves, freedmen, foreigners who, despite the imposed limitation, contribute to the vitality and dynamism of the celebration, bringing with them perspective experiences that enrich the gathering. As I imagine these scenes, I feel the mix of emotions that permeate the space: the excitement of novelty, the comfort of familiarity, the weight of prejudice, the hope of acceptance. All of this creates a rich and complex human tapestry, revealing the many facets of ancient Rome and human nature. This is an invitation to contemplate the celebration not just as a moment of pleasure, but as a mirror of society, where contradictions and harmonies coexist, and where each individual, with their differences and similarities, contributes to the story that unfolds silently round us. As the night deepens and the shadows lengthen across the walls of the ancient Roman domus, I feel it's the perfect time to reflect on what these festivals, with all their brilliance and complexity, truly meant to those who lived through that era. Because behind the torchlight and the laughter echoing through the halls lies a much larger story, a story of resilience and the eternal human search for a connection and meaning. Imagine with me the silence that begins to envelop the space after hours of conversation, laughter. The fire crackle slowly in the hearth, casting a warm glow that dances across the polished surfaces, while the lingering scent of incense and flowers still permeates the air like a delicate veil enveloping. A subtle weariness begins to set in, mixed with a sense of satisfaction and fulfillment, as if each soul present had found that is small refuge from the uncertainties of the outside world. It is in this moment of stillness that the true essence of the festival is revealed, not as a simple event of pleasure or luxury, but as a symbol of the courage of those who, even in the face of daily hardships, illnesses, losses, and injustices, found the strength to celebrate life in its entirety, with all its contradiction, joys and pains. The resilience I perceive in Roman festivals was not just physical, but above all cultural and spiritual. It was the resilience of a people who refused to be defined solely by the rigors of survival, who sought in the celebration of body, spirit a way to affirm their humanity. Every dance gesture, every toast, every exchange of glances was a silent declaration that, despite the challenge, life went on, and there was beauty and meaning to be found in it. I think of the faces illuminated by the flame, marked by life's experience, but also by the glow of hope and momentary joy. I see men and women who, even bound by rigid social norms, found in celebrations a space to express hidden desires, build alliances, challenge conventions, and create new stories. Their courage lay in the act of allowing themselves to live these moments, aware of their fragility and their strength. This courage was also present in the organization of the parties themselves and the effort to bring together people of different backgrounds, statuses, and histories to create an environment where respect, seduction, and conviviality could coexist. It was an act of collective construction, a social fabric woven with threads of understanding, empathy, at times tension, but always with the intention of keeping alive the flame of coexistence and shared pleasure. Reflecting on this resistance, I feel a deep connection with those who came before us and realize that, despite time and change, the human search for meaning, connection, and celebration is constant. This invisible but powerful heritage spans the centuries, silently echoing in our own lives and encounters. And so, as you close this evening with me, I want you to take with you not only a curiosity about the past, but also the inspiration to cultivate in your own time and space that same courage and capacity to celebrate life in all its complexity. May you find your own moments of celebration, whether large or small, public or private, where you can feel fully alive and connected. If this journey through ancient Rome touched your heart, brought calm, reflection, or simply a moment of pause, I invite you to share this experience. Let us know in the comments where you listen, what feelings the story evoked, and what it means to you. Thus, we continue together on this journey of discovery, intertwining past and present, dreams and reality. Take a deep breath now. Feel the air slowly coming in and out, allowing that sense of calm and connection to settle in. And when you're ready, open your eyes, bringing with you the serenity and wisdom that come from knowing the courage of those who lived before us.